We will get this meeting started. Call to order for the Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission on April 18th, 2023. Roll call.
All right, Katie Hostetler. Here. Cindy Hirschfield. Here. Rob Levitt.
Yes.
Eric Bozick.
Yes.
Kyle Oberketter.
Here.
And Bill Marin.
Yo.
Super, you have a quorum.
Excellent. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for March 7th of 2023. Do we have any comments or clarifications?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Rob. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next item then is a public hearing on 325 East Cody Lane application for a domestic abuse shelter. Thank you. Staff?
A quick second here, let me
Sure.
screen shared.
You want me to pull that down? Is that a little high? Yeah,
Little.
yeah.
I was wondering if that was gonna happen.
Come on, jump.
Optimistic.
Not higher. Good.
That's good, thanks. Thanks, Chris. I can usually reach it. The craziest, but anyway.
Okay, we have the applicants here with us this evening. We've got Chris Benden, Aaron Wackerly of Benden and Adams, and we've got Shannon from Response. This is a public hearing to consider an application submitted by Response for a special review, a PUD amendment, site plan review, ESA reach to floodplain review, as well as a community housing review. To construct a domestic abuse shelter at 325 East Cody Lane. We've got a vicinity map up here on the screen. And as you can see, it's at the end of the cul-de-sac. The property is approximately 28,000 square foot, and it's a vacant lot. It's zoned industrial PUD, and it's part of the Basalt Business Center East PUD. Some areas of the property have floodplain, and you can see the floodplain in this area. The proposal is to construct a domestic abuse shelter that's to contain a 2,000 square foot approximately office space for Response, domestic abuse shelter that's to contain 7 client rooms and 1 deed restricted community housing unit. They're also proposing 17 off-street parking spaces as part of the site plan. The background is that the applicants received approval of a PUD amendment last year to add domestic abuse shelter as a special review use on Lot H of the Basalt Business Center East PUD. The applicants did not have a specific design finalized at the time or an operations plan. So now they have developed a site-specific development plan for consideration by P&Z and Council. The review process for a special review for minor PUD amendment, as well as the other associated land use actions, require a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Town Council. And it also requires public hearings at both the P&Z and Town Council level. In reviewing the application, staff has identified a series of discussion items that are in your staff memo, and we also have them up on the screen here. The first one is consistency with the master plan. As was discussed during the PUD amendment review for the use last year, the property is in the urban growth boundary. It is near transit, and one of the significant goals of the master plan is to ensure people at risk of displacement are stabilized to remain in the community, and staff believes that the proposed use and facility are consistent with that goal. Other topics included similar uses in other communities As was also discussed as part of the PUD amendment on the use, staff looked at other local examples of similar facilities. The most similar facility was in Gypsum, and staff checked in with the local officials in Gypsum, and they didn't have any problems with security or really any issues with the facility after it began operating. Related to other topics, dimensional requirements, the applicant is proposing to meet all the dimensional requirements of the PUD with the exception of building height. They're proposing to establish the building height at a sea level measurement at the top of the ridge of the structure at 64.45 feet above sea level, which equates to basically 29 feet as measured by code. The reason for the adjustment that the applicant is seeking is that they need to raise the first finished floor above the floodplain elevation because a portion of the structure will be on piers, as you can see here in this diagram that we have on the screen. Additionally, the site's grade has changed over time with the construction of the Highway 82 adjacent to it, so there's been fill that's been brought in. So the HOA has reviewed the proposed height establishment and provided a letter of consent for the adjustment that's in your packet materials. Other topics included the affordable community housing component of the project. The applicants have requested a community housing review due to the unique nature of the facility. The applicants have proposed a 2-bedroom unit to satisfy the mitigation requirements. The town code assumes 4 employees are generated per 1,000 square foot of commercial use, but there is an allowance in the town code for a community housing review for unique uses such as this. The applicants have proposed that the facility will have 5 full-time employees rather than the 4 employees per 1,000 that are in the code. And using the 5 full-time employees and the calculation methodology in the code, that would require approximately 400 square feet of affordable housing to be provided. The 2-bedroom unit that is proposed at about 900 square feet to mitigate for the requirements. Related to the housing, the applicants have proposed some special operating characteristics for the community housing unit since the facility is integrated into the overall domestic abuse facility. The applicants have asked for the unit to be a Category 2 unit instead of a Category 1, as it better fits the incomes of the staffing of the response organization, as well as that the domestic abuse facility use is kind of a hybrid use between a commercial and residential facility. And typically, the residential is allowed to mitigate at a Category 2. The applicants have also requested lower minimum hours to be worked by clients of the facility to be able to stay in the unit of 1,040, which is below the town's minimum requirement of 1,500 hours per year, because there's difficulty in them obtaining and keeping a long-term job or a full-time job, and the applicants can speak to that a bit more. The unit is also proposed to be solely for response employees, as well as their volunteers and clients, and Bach supported the request because of the unique facility and use of the facility. The conditions that are included in your staff memo would approve of those adjustments to the housing program. Related to the floodplain and ESA requirements, the floodplain and project was modeled by the town's hydrologist, who is Robert Crable of Matrix Design. He determined that the finished floor elevations, as you can see here in the diagram, were sufficiently above the floodplain elevation to meet the town code requirements. He also determined in the modeling that the flood elevation, base flood elevation on the adjacent properties would not be impacted by the development. With regards to traffic, there is a traffic study that was included in the application that was prepared by SGM. Dan Coakley of SGM reviewed this development. He is also the same person that worked on the 2016-2017 traffic study that was done for all of Southside. And in the traffic study that's included in your packet, he determined that there would be additional minimal traffic that would be created by this facility, and that the Basalt Avenue Highway 82 intersection would still operate at an acceptable level of service with the improvements that were called for in the 2016-2017 traffic study that was done for Southside. Those improvements included, let me go back to the vicinity map here, the addition of laneage in and out of Basalt Avenue from Highway 82 that was installed with the pedestrian underpass that was done several years ago, as well as the construction of a mini roundabout at the Cody Lane Basalt Avenue intersection, which has not been done at this point. But there are conditions in other projects for Southside that require contribution of funding to the construction of a mini roundabout at this location. This condition has also been carried over into the draft conditions that you have on this project to provide their fair share of cost towards that roundabout. Other discussion items include off-street parking. The applicants have proposed 17 off-street parking spaces, as you can see on the site plan. The domestic abuse shelter use is not included in the parking use table that we have in the code. So in breaking the use down, the 2,000 square foot office space would require 8 spaces. The community housing unit would require 2 spaces, and that would leave 7 spaces for the client shelter rooms. And once again, there are 7 client shelter rooms. In kind of breaking down the parking requirements by the different components of the use, staff does believe that there's sufficient off-street parking to meet the requirements, and that's been included in the draft conditions of approval. Other topics include the acknowledgement of existing industrial uses in the area. As part of the PUD amendment on the use, this was a significant discussion item. It's required that the applicant include in their agreements with clients that they are in an industrial area and there are existing industrial uses around the facility that may have noise, smells, and other characteristics that are consistent with industrial uses. And once again, that was a requirement that was in the PUD amendment for the use to be established in the PUD, and that ordinance requires it to be carried over into the special review approval as well. Other topics include green building and consistency with the wildfire mitigation ordinance. There are draft conditions that you have in your memo that would require compliance with the town's sustainable building regulations at the time of building permit. The applicants can potentially speak more to this as part of their discussion as well, but the applicants have applied for a grant to get funding to try to get to net zero or as close to net zero as possible. And the applicants have also proposed materials that are consistent with the town's wildfire mitigation requirements that were put into the code a couple years back. And There's a condition in the draft conditions that require that permit be consistent with those materials. Other topics include vested rights. The applicants have proposed to meet the town's vested rights requirements of 3 years of vested rights. And so that's been included in the draft conditions. This evening, staff would recommend hearing applicant comments, taking public comments because it is a public hearing, and then providing commission discussion. If you're comfortable with the conditions, you could make a recommendation to the town council. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen and bring up the applicant's presentation. Chris and Aaron, would you like to introduce your team while I'm doing that?
Yes, hi, good evening. I am Erin Wackerly. This is Chris Bendon. We're with Bendon Adams, and this is Shannon Meyer, Executive Director of Response. I also want to give recognition to our design team, 2757 Design, Crystal River Civil, as well as DHM Design, who have worked and collaborated tirelessly and very thoughtfully for this project.
Just a quick second here.
Yeah, no problem. We are here today seeking your positive recommendation of the special review, site plan review, ESA floodplain review, minor PUD amendment, and community housing review for the Response project. Tonight we are going to provide a brief overview of Response, who they are, what they do, background on the 325 East Cody Lane property, what we are asking the town of Basalt, what we think of the suggested conditions, and the compatibility with the Basalt master plan. Shannon, can you tell us about yourself and your organization and what led to this project?
Sure, thanks for having us. And there'll be repetition for some of you from the hearings back in November, but my name's Shannon Meyer. I'm Director of Response, and our organization has been serving survivors of domestic and sexual abuse for 40 years. This is actually our 40th anniversary year, which is pretty exciting. And over that time, we've served thousands of survivors. Last year alone, we served 171 survivors and answered 300 calls to our 24-hour crisis helpline. During all that time, we've never had a permanent place to send survivors who are fleeing from abusive homes. Back in the day, in the 80s, when Response was founded by a group of volunteers, some of those women volunteers would actually house survivors in their homes, sometimes for up to a month or 2 months at a time. As the movement professionalized, it was realized that that was neither practicable or safe, and that model was discontinued. And so all we had to provide was emergency shelter for survivors in imminent danger for up to 3 nights. And that's, of course, not even a Band-Aid on a situation where someone's fleeing an abusive home. When I started with Response 5.5 years ago, that was kind of one of my first priorities to fix, is to come up with some more housing assistance for survivors in these terrible situations. So with the help of private funding and government grants, we were able to start our Housing for Survivors program, which has 3 prongs. So we kept the emergency housing in local hotels. We added to that long-term flexible rental assistance to help clients afford a place on their own once they'd left an abusive home, afford to get into a place. And that's for no more than 12 months, but is very flexible as is needed by a survivor. And then the middle piece of that housing tier is this transitional housing. And that, at the time, we started providing in apartments that Response would rent throughout the valley. We started with 1, we quickly realized we needed to rent another, we got to 2, we got to 3, to 4, and there always was demand for those units. In 2021, we had a really hard time renting a 4th unit, and we had a waiting list all the time. We ended up buying an apartment because we couldn't find a place to rent. We were up to 4 units, and then we lost one of our rented units when the landlord changed their mind. So that, and the fact that last year alone we housed 17 survivors with 17 children, and at the same time turned away 13 survivors because of lack of availability, have made us realize that now is a time to pursue a permanent home for Response and a permanent shelter for domestic violence victims in our valley, which has never existed before. Demand for Response services has increased 20% since the start of the pandemic. That's both clients coming to us and crisis calls, and the demand for housing, as with everything related to housing in this valley, has increased exponentially as well. So in this last summer, the Board of Response kind of looked at the numbers and said, now is the time to pursue this project. And we found the perfect property in 325 Cody Lane. It's perfect for us because of its proximity to services in Basalt, its proximity to the park and ride. So many of our survivors go into shelter without a vehicle, and so many also go in with kids, and yet they're having to get their kids to school, they're having to go to work. So having it on the bus line is very important to us. And then through the town's vision of approving our use for that property, we ended up closing on the property, I think the day after we got final approval from town council, and since that time have been really moving forward with our plans to make this shelter a reality on that project. One of the due diligence things that we did when we were looking into this plan is to, as James mentioned, look at other surrounding communities. And our sister agency over in Eagle County, Bright Future Foundation, had a old building that was a confidential safe house that they had used for shelter. And they, as with so many other organizations in our field, realized that that model is just not tenable anymore. It's really hard to keep a location like that confidential. They weren't built with safety in mind, so when a location was found out by perpetrators, it wasn't safe. And because people in shelter these days are going to work, they are taking their kids to school, they're not hidden away, it was so easy for those places to be discovered. So pretty much everyone building a new shelter in our field right now across the country is doing this public-facing model that we're pursuing here. And that allows us to have our office and the shelter co-located. So we have finally room for all of our staff to meet with clients. We can provide food and clothing in a food clothing pantry we're gonna have on site, as well as having 7 efficiency rooms in the shelter that we've talked about. So safer for survivors. The whole building is built with security concerns top of mind, better way to provide services to clients in shelter and clients in the community. And last but not least is it destigmatizes the fact that people are suffering from domestic abuse by not hiding them away, putting it out there to our community that this is an issue that we face in our community and this is how we help people here. So with that, we'll turn it to whoever talks next.
Thank you, Shannon. I will go ahead and cover a little bit of the property background, if you could, thank you. The proposed development, as James mentioned, is Lot H, which is located within the Basalt Business Center East PUD. It is addressed as 325 East Cody Lane. The parcel is currently vacant and it is located within the industrial zone, which allows residential as an accessory use. It is approximately 28,000 square feet in size. It is located within a floodplain. There's a very specific protocol that needs to be followed for developability on that site. Same protocol anyone on Cody Lane would have to follow. There is a floor area ratio for this parcel of 2:1, which allows for a building of just under 57,000 square feet, which is not what we are proposing today. At the time, as Shannon and James both mentioned, when Response went under contract to purchase the lot, our use was not part of the PUD. And so we applied for a PUD amendment and were approved in December 2022 to add domestic abuse shelter as a special review use that pertains to this lot only. Can I get the next slide, please? While this type of use is something that we wish didn't exist, as verbalized by Shannon, unfortunately there is a real need in our community for this. Currently, this type of social infrastructure that is being proposed by this project doesn't exist, and that is what this application is seeking to create. So now I want to talk about the project a little bit. Next, there we go, thank you. And what we are proposing. This development encompasses the construction of a mixed-use project, office space as well as shelter, and the inclusion of an employee dwelling unit. Response anticipates that they will serve approximately 40 to 50 clients per year at this facility. And up on the screen, you'll see a rendering, which we will revisit a couple times throughout this presentation. But first, I want to cover some of the components of the floodplain review. As mentioned early on in Shannon and Response's due diligence period, they discovered that this property is located within a 100-year mapped floodplain. So they engaged Matrix Design Group to conduct an ESA floodplain review. At that stage, they 2757 design as well as Crystal River Civil also worked very closely together to coordinate the civil efforts as well as any sort of architectural design in order to ensure that this design would be floodplain compliant. Now, I'm going to walk through this a little bit. This language is very technical, might sound a little wonky, so just bear with me as I walk through some of the design components for floodplain mitigation. On the screen to the southwest in purple reflect the proposed retaining walls that are on the edge of the ditch and that move south. And then as we move along to the east, that is where the irrigation ditch continues, and in the green is where the grade will be built up from the edge of the ditch on that side. 2 detention ponds are proposed. Each of them will have the capacity to manage the event of a 100-year storm. And then as reflected here, there is a significant portion of the building that is also required to be built on piers. The portion of the building that will not be on piers, kind of reflected in white next to the red there, is required to be elevated 1 foot above the floodplain. So what this proposed grading and drainage plan calls for is that in the event of a flood, that any floodwaters would then be pushed into either those detention ponds or back into the irrigation ditch, and not moving westward onto any of the neighboring properties on East Cody Lane, which was a concern of the initial ESA floodplain review conducted by Matrix. This grading and drainage plan was then provided back to Matrix, who reviewed it and ultimately determined that this proposed design will not increase the chance of floodwaters spilling to the west or affecting this property or others. This development, therefore, adequately mitigates for floodplain requirements for the property. In fact, it will actually decrease the chance that floodwaters will affect neighboring properties. Now, to get into the site plan and special review, there is an aerial on the screen that shows the vicinity and access to the site. In the left-hand corner is the main intersection of Basalt Avenue and Highway 82. If you're traveling up Valley, you take a right on Basalt Avenue, and then it's kind of nestled in the trees there, but then you'll take a left onto Cody Lane, and then that's a publicly accessible road by the town. As James mentioned, in 2016, a traffic study was conducted by SGM that specifically focused on Southside Basalt and prescribed a level of service for the Highway 82 and Basalt Avenue intersection. Our lot was not included in that analysis at the time, so we engaged SGM again and asked them to take a look at any development on our lot and how it would pertain to that level of service prescribed in the 2016 study. SGM ended up concluding that any sort of traffic impacts from our proposed development would be very minimal. Now I want to go over some of the site plans as put together by our architecture team as well as our landscaping team. The architectural design, as reflected in the site plan here, was coordinated by 2757 Design. It was designed with the goal to be a very energy efficient design. The intent for this project is to be all electric. Response, and I may have Shannon elaborate on this a little bit later, has applied for a series of grants, including a DOLA grant, a CORE grant, amongst others. We also utilize the talents of DHM Design, who incorporated a very thoughtful landscaping plan to complement the architecture. This development is proposed to be a 2-story building. It is approximately 2,000 square feet of office, approximately 5,000 square feet of shelter. This shelter will provide, as Shannon discussed, critical temporary housing for survivors and their children. It will also include an EDU, which will be on the 2nd level above the carport. It'll be 2-bedroom. Now on the site plan, as you'll see here, there's the entrance from the cul-de-sac that leads into the parking lot. All development proposed on all of the plans are within the required setbacks. The entire perimeter of the property is proposed to be secured with an 8-foot fence. All of this fencing will be floodplain compliant. And on the next screen, this gives a little bit more detail to some of the landscape features. This space does have a dedication of 60% to open space. And there to the east is where the Highway 82 is from the perimeter of the property. Yeah, thanks, James. And I know it's kind of hard to see on the legend there to the right, but the kind of fluffy bubbles, the fluffy circles there along the perimeter indicate additional plantings that will produce green screening along the highway in addition to the 8-foot fence that will be there. Also, in the southern corner of the property are the addition of more plantings and native seedings, and in the corner there, where there's some gray is indicated to be an outdoor sanctuary for clients of Response and employees. There's also a turf area that is intended to be children's play. This will have additional fencing for security. Actually, as a matter of fact, this whole southern corner here is only accessible via keypad entry. So even though it's outdoor, it is very secure. There will also be some ornamental plantings. Those are limited to the entrance of the building. The design intent of the landscaping is to very much enhance and maintain the existing natural vegetation of the site, which it is it's a very beautiful site, a very green site. As reflected on these site plans, the architecture and landscape designs are very thoughtful, of a moderate scale, and are intended to preserve and enhance the site's existing conditions. Now I want to show the floor plans a little bit here and just walk through them. So this is the first level, which comes in, as you will see from the bottom here, enters in from the parking lot. You will ascend some stairs and enter onto the front porch. If you were to walk to the right, that indicates the secure keypad entry that would lead to the shelter. If you continue, off to the left, that is the entrance to the office. And as you'll see here, there's ample space for offices, for client meeting rooms, the food pantry and clothing pantry that's provided to clients that Shannon mentioned, staff kitchen, room for maintenance and utilities, a conference room. And if you continue right on the interior hallway, there is another secure keypad entry that will lead in to one client family efficiency room. And then there is also room for common area. There is elevator as well as accessibility. And then you'll see down at the bottom where the carport is located. On the second floor, this consists of 6 more efficiency client units. Several of them have the capability to become adjoining in case there are additional families and additional space is needed, or they can also lock off for a single occupant. As you can see here towards the right, there is a communal living area and a communal kitchen, laundry. Part of Response's desired model is to provide an environment where these clients can have social interactions and connections with one another. And so that's why we wanted to create some of these communal spaces. However, the efficiency units will also have kitchenettes for clients who desire privacy. And then moving downward is the location of the EDU, which is above the carport, and I'll go into more detail on the EDU here shortly. Now, in regards to parking, there is a provision in the Town of Basalt Municipal Code that states for a new or previously undefined use, such as ours, that the Planning and Zoning Commission can determine the appropriate amount of parking spaces. We are proposing 17 parking spaces. 3 of those spaces, if you look kind of towards the right, there's a thick black line that indicates a gateway, which is secured. 3 of those spots in there are secured, and then 2 of the total 17 spots are ADA accessible spots as well. We believe that these parking spots satisfy the town requirements. As mentioned by James, there are 2 required for the employee dwelling unit, and then for the size of square footage for our office calculates out to 8 additional, and that leaves 7 more for the use of clients. Therefore, our project provides a sufficient amount of parking for any visitor to the facility. Now, moving on to the building materials, the Architectural Control Committee for the HOA does have a set of design requirements. Amongst them are the building materials. All of our building materials do comply with their requirements. They will include synthetic wood siding, which will be on the front of the building in the EDU, board and batten cement board siding on the lower walls, sides, and back of the building, and standing seam metal panels for the roof. All of these materials will be wildfire compliant. So as you can see from this rendering, the design intent of this building is to utilize an earth tone and very natural palette that meets the HOA requirements and is complementary of the surrounding neighborhood characteristics. Now I want to discuss the minor PUD amendment and our request for a height adjustment. At the original time when the PUD was approved and the covenants for the HOA were written, the maximum height for this lot was stated to be 23 feet. Well, that was 30 years ago. And over that time, the grade has shifted over the last 30 years. And as a matter of fact, several different grades exist on this lot. In order to adequately mitigate for the floodplain, including our ground floor, our first floor, being required to be built 1 foot up above the floodplain, that has an effect on the location of mechanical and electrical systems. They cannot be located in a crawl space. We are proposing that mechanical and electrical be located in an attic space, and also with a significant portion of this building being built on piers, it led us to a design that we have proposed of 29 feet. The applicant has worked very closely with the Architectural Control Committee. We want to make sure we ensure compliance with their design requirements. Based off of our conversations with the HOA, it was ultimately decided that they were comfortable approving a height of 6,645 feet above sea level, which once again equates to a building of 29 feet. We would suggest that the town consider using the measurement method of the mean sea level just for consistency across uses and just ease for everyone involved. We We have a very active HOA, a very involved HOA, and they're a very important constituent to our project. Measuring from the mean sea level provided them with a comfort around providing us with approval with our height adjustment. Additionally, when we were looking at the height, 2757 Design conducted numerous computer visualizations, as you can see right there. This is the back of the building as viewed from a driver on Highway 82. The next slide is taken from the view of the cul-de-sac. To the left, you'll see is Berrien. To the right is the rendering of our building. The next slide is once again taken from the perspective of the highway, driving up valley. And then the third slide is an aerial view. I've got a blue arrow down there in the corner to indicate our building. So as you can see from these computer visualizations, the proposed design and height is of a building that is nestled very nicely into its site and fits into its neighborhood nicely with very little visual impact. Now I want to cover the housing review. Response, as stated by James, has 5 employees. That is the entirety of their organization. They intend to stay at 5 employees. This has been a sustainable model for the organization. No new employees are estimated to be generated as part of this development. However, we acknowledge that the town has a housing standard, and that is why we created community housing for 5 full-time equivalent employees. When using the town's measurement method, this equates to 399 square feet that are required, and we are providing just under 900 square feet, which is more than double that requirement. On the floor plan here, you will see at the very top, there is an ADA accessible door that is a requirement for this project. 2-bedroom, 2-bath with outdoor space. Entrance is separate. The outdoor entrance is separate as you ascend some stairs. And this is located above the carport. Last week, we presented these plans to the BOC committee, and we had a very positive review with the BOC, in which both they and the town of Basalt provided a good recognition that was related to the sensitivity and safety concerns of a project such as this. The town has provided the applicant with some flexibility for the community housing unit in recognition of our unique use. It could be argued that a use such as this more aligns with a community service type use. However, we understand that this development does have an impact on the local housing situation. Our request last week to BOC for flexibility was directly related to the viability of this special use. And it's very important to the applicant to think ahead and to plan for all scenarios in order to create a development that directly satisfies all the needs of their constituents. Some of the flexibility related to that addressed some of the hours that were worked, as mentioned by James. Sometimes when a client comes into responsive services, they might not be working, they may be working less hours. There's various reasons for this. So that is amongst the 3 requests we made for flexibility for this very unique use. We therefore feel that this development provides more than adequate community housing in a flexible model that can benefit Response's employees, volunteers, and clients. Now I want to touch on the draft conditions. We have reviewed all the draft conditions proposed, and we are in agreement with all the draft conditions. In closing, we feel that this project is compatible with the principles set forth in the Town of Basalt Master Plan. The design is of a modest scale. It preserves a large amount of open space. It's very walkable. It's very biker friendly. It's located near to alternate transportation. The goal of this project is to just fit nicely into the neighborhood and its characteristics, and to provide comfort and refuge for anyone who visits the shelter in any capacity. We feel that this project speaks to the identity of our community and our ethic around how to treat one another and how to extend care to those in need, and to help create a social infrastructure to those who are looking to rebuild and to begin their healing process. We want to thank you for your dedication to this board and for your time tonight. We feel this is a very special project, a very important project, and we feel this is a project you will be proud to be part of. I'm sure you have questions. I am happy to answer those. We also have architecture and landscape here who can help answer anything detail-oriented. Thank you.
Thank you for that very thorough presentation. We'll open up for commissioner questions. Katie, any questions?
Not right now.
Kyle?
No.
Cindy?
Just for my own knowledge, are the 7 shelter units, are those considered transitional housing, or are they more like a 2 to 3 night solution?
They're up to 3 months.
Oh, okay.
So some agencies call that transitional, some call it short-term.
Got it, but it's going to be more, they don't have to
Yeah.
just night and be out. Where will the employees work? I didn't notice many offices down below, except the director's office.
Yeah, the first floor meeting rooms are meeting room offices.
Oh, okay, okay.
James, can we show those again?
Yeah, just a second here.
There we go.
All along that back wall, those are client meeting room offices.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Only I get an office.
Yeah, everyone else is to float, right? That's all my questions for now.
Okay, I have a couple questions for staff. What exactly is a mini roundabout?
Mini roundabout is a smaller version of a full roundabout. To state it plainly, but
Is it like just paint, or is it grade separated and all that stuff?
no, it's
Is it
grade
the Snowmass
separated.
roundabout?
Yeah, it's similar to the
The one that
Snowmass
does nothing?
roundabout.
Perfect.
The one that people drive over, yeah.
It's also similar to the concept that we have planned down at the end of Midland as well, as part of the Midland streetscape. So, yeah, it's got smaller dimensions than
But you
the
could just
Basalt
drive straight
Avenue
through it
roundabout.
if you wanted to.
You could.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and also, when this is to be built, what year IBC is anticipated to be in force at that time?
Well,
Get their building permit in.
Yeah, I know, but do you have like 2021 in the pipeline coming up soon?
Yes.
Okay. So that should be, like, those things could coincide.
Yes.
Okay, that would just fix my comments later on. That's all I got.
Yeah, no, just quickly for staff. 6 months ago, was that a sketch plan review?
no, it wasn't a sketch plan. It was simply a PUD amendment to change the
So is this
use.
considered first reading? Are we gonna see it again, or we vote once and done?
No, this is one round with P and Z and council, so it's,
That's it.
yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Yep.
I do not have any questions. That being said, we'll open it up for public comment then at 6:48. If you'd like to make a comment, please come up, state your name and your address. Are we doing the online thing still?
We are, we don't have any attendees.
Okay. Seeing no one wanting to speak, we'll close the public hearing at 6:49. And then we'll make time for commissioner comments. We'll start with Rob.
No comments, all in favor?
Okay, I think first off, I want to say I think this is an absolutely great thing. I just love it. I also want to say it's very consistent with your previous application, so, or the PUD component of it, so that's very good. I have a couple ADA comments, which is usually the ones that come from me. Number one, I know that your type A unit is taken up with the employee unit, is your ADA unit. I would encourage you to have an extra type A unit for the shelter as well, because you never know, and it's one of those things, it's just the right thing to do as opposed to the required thing to do. Also, the type, depending on when the code changes, you may be required to do all type B units, and only a couple of them are adaptable right now, are big enough to be adaptable.
Okay.
So you may get in a jam with that.
The plans should reflect that we do have 2 type A units currently proposed.
I only saw one, which is, but it's hard to say because it's not shown actually on the thing. But
Okay.
it doesn't matter. I'm trying to get, as many as possible is where I'm going for. And I don't want you guys to get yourself in a jam with type B units when they code switches, because when the code switches, they all have to be type Bs, which, can cause all kinds of trouble. But other than that, I think it's a great project.
Cindy?
I don't have any additional comments, except I think it fulfills a critical need.
Kyle?
Nothing.
Yep, nothing on my end.
My only comment would be that if the DOLA grants don't come through, I can please keep pursuing the net zero would be awesome. I know it's not the primary focus of what you're doing, but just throw that out there. At this point, do we have a motion or?
Well, I make a motion to recommend approval, town council, with the stated conditions.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
When you do the roll call, may I request that I go last, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Kyle Oberketter,
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfield,
Yes.
Katie Hostetler,
Yes.
Bill Marin,
Yes.
Rob Levitt,
Yes.
Eric Vozick.
I'm going to abstain because I don't want to mess this project up in any way, shape, or form. I think it's incredibly important. I don't think I have a conflict, but my wife worked for Response for many years, and I do not want to see this get messed up. And I wholeheartedly support this and think it's an incredible, great need for our community.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you all very much.
By the way, first presentation in front of a P and Z.
Well
Very
done.
good.
Thank you.
That would have worked well up in Aspen, too. It's a little bit overkill for us, but very thorough.
Very thorough. Excellent. The next item on the agenda then is an update on town projects. Staff?
Right. We'll start with the Midland Avenue streetscape. You can see the renderings are updated on the board behind you. It walks you from the Midland Mall, past Heirlooms, past the art base, up through, all the way up to what was formerly known as Skip's Market, but is now known as Monkeys. That's how we're going to describe the space. It's a children's clothing store that's in that space now. So the renderings are there. We had an open house last Wednesday, April 12th, with really good turnout. I don't know, I would guess we had probably 50 people there. That was from 5:30 to 7:30. We got feedback on consideration of enforcing 2-hour parking downtown. There was kind of split opinions about that. Of course, opinions about parallel parking, questions about schedule, and a fair amount of, I would say we had kind of equal support and enthusiasm about it, as well as really just kind of boiling down to parallel parking discussions, so, which many of you may have seen in the newspaper.
Has some of the general grumpiness settled down?
It's really interesting because there's certainly a group who's mostly interested in the parallel parking, and then our experience has been when we were able to, at this open house, break out into having one-on-one conversations with staff and the team, and other people felt comfortable. They were giving us lots of positive feedback, and just even some general, suggestions about types of flowers or planters, not whether this is a good project or not, just, yay, here's some ideas. So I think there's a lot of excitement going on. Yeah, absolutely. We did have a bid meeting this morning, and there were 4 or 5 contractors that showed up to fulfill the request to bid on Phase 2, to make sure we're getting a good number and to check on our schedule. Based on just kind of the general comments in the room this morning, I'm not sure that we're going to get what we're expecting, because it's a tough requirement for this much work at this time in the season when contractors are already booked. So we'll see what happens.
I thought the contractor was set already.
Yeah, and so what we're doing is we're just rebidding that second phase to make sure we have the best number we can.
And is the second phase the main part?
Yeah,
Okay.
and, there was certainly a discussion about whether, what the cost implications were to not do construction during the summer. And so, since we put it out to bid, we said, we decided that was an opportunity to find out.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit of pushback on that, so we'll see what happens. And then, as you probably experienced, the spur is underway, construction out there. Some of you may have heard me say that earlier, that they're shotcreting that new retaining wall, which will then be sculpted into basaltic rock, which will be a really neat function. It'll have a gabion post at the end and an art element as well. So our Sunday market will be in really nice new digs when it starts in late June. Anything else on the streetscape project?
No, I think that pretty much covers this streetscape project. We did have the visuals in your packet, as Michelle referred to. The other update we have is on the Basalt River Park band shell. It is under construction. They started doing the excavation this week. It's in the little circular area that's fenced off in the park. So that'll be fenced off for a little bit, and construction is proposed to go through end of June, early July, and then hopefully we'll have concerts starting in the park.
Yeah, we have, I might have mentioned this to you last time, and since you've just gotten so much information, I don't want to repeat something you've already heard, but the short story is we have an amazing lineup of 9 concerts, 2 starting in June in Triangle Park while the band shell is being finished, and then the remainder here in this park. And probably a tidbit I didn't have at a previous update was that we're going to have local openers from 5:30 to 6:30, and then a headliner at 7 to 8:30. So it's kind of exciting, like it's turning into a really big, exciting feeling thing. We're working through the opportunities to have nonprofit fundraising at these concerts, selling beverages, maybe light concessions, because of course we want to push everybody into the restaurants and surrounding businesses, but there's been a lot of excitement around that option as well. And then lastly, the River Park bus stop and restroom is on schedule for a July completion. You've noticed that it's fenced off while they're working away, and there's a temporary bus stop around the corner from there. So all on schedule and looking to be a bright and shiny July when we get there. And there is a neat rendering up on the top right of the band shell, if you haven't seen it. That's it.
How's the voting on the logo going? Much interaction?
Oh, yeah. It's coming to council for approval on next Tuesday. So it's been narrowed down from, it started with 9, it got narrowed down to 6, and now we're narrowed down to 3 with some revisions. And then I think the logo committee will make a recommendation to council on 1.
You guys voted?
Yeah.
No, are we
Has it,
supposed to go to the website and vote?
I got it off the link,
Yeah, I think it's on Let's Talk Basalt.
yeah.
not the newspaper article?
I saw the newspaper article,
was
but
that where the
I
link
missed the
was?
part about voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend you go and look on there.
So, Michelle, what were the last 3? Because I voted on Friday.
I think the last three or,
There was 5 in that last round.
mhm. There's one that has a familiar, I'll call it a familiar feeling. I don't have any technical words for these designs, sorry. A familiar feeling with a sunset, mountains and streams coming down. The second option was a little more abstract, trees, rivers shown and whatnot, but it was more simple design. And then the third design was, is the bee,
Oh, the bee.
the river.
That's my favorite.
Uh-huh.
Really?
It is.
Where
do we go?
Same, Rob. Yeah, Rob, I'm glad
The
you said
third option is,
At the brand
it's
committee meeting,
really
I
simple.
said,
Um,
everyone in Basalt is too old for that kind of graphic, so it probably won't happen, but that's the one I love.
So what's the
Didn't-
website?
Didn't get.
Let's
just-
talk.
It was young and
Basalt
edgy, and none of
dot
us are that.
It really just, when they put it on the truck, I was like, oh,
Finished,
yeah.
sorry.
That's
There's
what
only one
That's why you get to vote. But do you know, has there been many people voting? Just, I know,
I am not running that, but I'll find out. I think there have been. I think people are interested that know.
that's cool.
Yeah.
If we have that CDOT sign out there for very long in 82, you guys should change the sign and say vote for the town.
Yeah, how's
Oh,
the
that's
word
a good
getting out
idea.
about voting?
It's sitting there.
That could be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, the website is letstalk.basalt.net.
Find it.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much everything we do now is on there, so easy.
Other commissioner comments or staff updates?
We have in May a PUD amendment that P and Z will see related to changing the use of daycare in Southside to residential with a request to do a home daycare in there. So a little bit of semantics and it's related to property
Stotts Mill?
taxes. No, this is another one.
Okay.
But Stotts Mill, an update on that daycare as well. We did receive a proposal for the daycare in Stotts Mill through the RFP process, and we're working with that proposer to work on funding for finishing out the space. So we can give you more update hopefully soon on that.
Has the suit for the town center approval been dealt with, or is it still going on?
It got thrown out.
Got thrown out? I didn't
Yeah.
hear that.
Mhm.
Cool.
I think that was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
That was in the paper or something.
I don't remember seeing it.
The Park Modern guys been real busy. Is that because they have to finish the lake before they can do anything else, or?
It's one of their early phase requirements is to finish the trail around the lake and also put the lake back into the town's parcel. It was originally built outside the town's parcel, yeah.
All good?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Rob. All in favor?
Yay.
Aye. Motion adjourned at 7:04.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could have been out of here 30 minutes ago if she had read the room.